Welcome to Carrying Wayward, a supernatural podcast for fans who aren't ready to let go and newcomers to the series who are ready to jump in. I'm Marie Viguru.
And I'm Drew Schulman. In this episode, we're diving into Supernatural Season 8, Episode 21, The Great Escapist. Let's get this show on the road. This episode has so much. The amount of things I'm like, my brain has to wrap itself around for the recap is like, oh my god, and then this happens, and then this happens, and this happens. Oh, it's a lot.
It feels like this episode is like the TV version of like the Everything Bagel seasoning.
That's a very apt description. It never felt overwhelming and never felt like I never needed to slow down to let me catch my breath. Like it had a decent pacing, and I don't know if maybe a second viewing just made it easier, but I even like looking back, I don't feel like I was jarred by it at all. I was very like, oh, this is just good TV.
Now keep in mind, we are in the last, this is the final three. Like this is the last three episodes of this season. A lot of stuff happens, right? And I think that this episode particularly pulls it off really well.
Yeah, and I've definitely been critical in the past, but other seasons kind of doing this like, oh shit, we have 3 episodes left, let's cram in as much exposition as we can. And I mean, here I feel like we learn a lot, but it doesn't feel like ham-fisted.
Well, there you go. It's also that like there were 3 trials and they've already done 2. So we know that somewhere along the line there might be a 3rd trial. We do learn a little bit more about that in this episode at the end. So they don't have to like resolve 15 different things. Like we know where they're going. And a lot of this stuff is kind of like coming to what feels like a more organic end than what we may have seen in previous seasons. So yeah, it's basically showing just like how skilled a showrunner Jeremy Carver really is.
I kind of knew that 6 and 7 were like tied in a way where like they were like one larger chunk of like content. So, like, I kind of expected the end of season 6 to roll neatly into season 7, so I wasn't as much, like, waiting for, like, a final point. But I guess I don't really have anything that tells me how far season 8 goes with this storyline. Like, part of me was like, oh yeah, there's only 2 episodes left. Are they going to finish the 3rd trial? Are they just going to start working on it? Is season 9 going to be a whole season of trial number 3? And heck, even if we just finish the trial in 2 episodes, that doesn't leave a lot of time for, closing the gates of hell, which I still don't think will happen given the way the show's written. But again, maybe they do close them and then have to reopen them next season for a reason. Who knows? I'm really like in the weeds here. I love it.
It's a good place to be, I find, with Supernatural. When you don't know where things are going, that is probably the place that you really want to be. When you know where things are going, that's never a good place to be because it's always like, ah!
With each passing episode, I know less, and that's hard. It's hard to believe.
Shows how much of a skilled showrunner Jeremy Carver really is, I suppose.
This week, patrons and coffee supporters got to hear us answer the question, what performance from an actor had stood out the most to you? On the supporter exclusive Impala Talk feed. You can go to carryingwayward.com to support us and claim your perks.
Are we ready for this week's recap?
Buckle up, it's a long one. Go ahead, count me down.
3, 2, 1, Angel Bullets.
Oh my god, that's a huge plot point as well I have to bring up. Okay, quickly. Kevin wakes up, everything seems fine, but he right away clocks something's wrong. We then find out that Crowley's directing this fake Sam and Dean, which Kevin's already figured out. Kevin's missing. There's an email that basically confirms he's dead, but then Garth confirms there's no new activity on the Prophets, so maybe he's not dead. We don't know. Cass is hiding in every bigger sin ever, which is the best plot point I've ever seen, which then leads to probably the first time the show has legitimately like shocked me with something, when he shows up and Naomi has slaughtered an entire restaurant and that one woman with the eyes burnt out. I couldn't sleep that night. And then it leads to Cass being tortured until they can get more information. But we'll have to pause that because Sam, despite some weird memory stuff and not feeling very well, leads them to a hotel on a native reserve where they find out they've been leaving stories for this mysterious person who's been there for hundreds of years, who is, surprise, Metatron. I almost said the. They meet him. He finds out that Sam's doing the trials. They save Kevin, who by this point was being harassed by Crowley because Crowley figured out that he had figured out Crowley's plan and the double cross. And of course, Crowley had to, in between all that, go torture Cass and get the angel tablet that he now has. And scared off Naomi because he crafted angel bullets because that's a thing he can do. But finally, at the end of all this, Sam's not doing too well, but he has like a weird connection to Metatron with his memories and like something's going on with the storytelling in his mind. We have the third trial, which kind of a cop out that Kevin spent all this time getting it, just to have Metatron be like, oh, I can tell you what it is. Like I feel bad for Kevin. And we know it is curing a demon, which is a thing apparently. I think that's everything time.
We're going to go through this with a bit of a fine-tooth comb in the long game. So this episode was written by Ben Edlund, directed by Robert Duncan McNeil. He also directed Skin, by the way. I think that was his last episode. So he hasn't been here in a while, but he directed 2 very, very good episodes. And this one originally aired on May 1st, 2013.
I feel like Skin was like one of the only other ones where like I don't think I was nearly as icked out as I was in the scene with the Biggersons slaughtering here, but I remember being like, oh wow, that's like really good, like well done TV gore with the whole like shedding of skin thing that the shifter did. So nice through line in your episodes there, Robert.
I love that name, Robert Duncan McNeil. Like that is a name.
That is like a triple name is good, but when it's a triple name that actually works well, like spot on.
We find out that Kevin was indeed abducted by Crowley, right? You did not believe me. You did not believe me, but he was.
So are you telling me Crowley repaired the windows when he left?
Yes!
Which, you know what? Totally makes sense for Crowley. You know what? Okay, that's a Crowley move and a half.
He's a gentleman. He cleans up after he,
He cleans up because he wants to confuse the boys.
Well, I mean, that too. We also find out that Crowley is basically keeping him in a TV set-like, Truman Show-like environment that looks exactly like Garth's, like, safe houseboat. He's got, like, demons looking and acting like Sam and Dean to fool Kevin into thinking that he is in the safe houseboat with Sam and Dean.
So I have one like weird moment with this, and I think I just want to know if it's like I just missed them saying this, or is it just legit like you have to figure it out yourself? When he splashes them with holy water and they have no reaction, how did he do that? And then part of me is like, did they ever just say like they replaced all the holy water with regular water in the boat and just didn't tell him? Because I just love that it's a thing he would do, but I also feel like that has to be a deleted line somewhere because it's too funny not to have one of them bring it up.
We do find out that Sam is doing worse and worse after the second trial.
Sam's supernatural flu is not holding well.
No, exactly. We also see Dean exploding with anger at the thought of Kevin being dead, and this is not a judgment, I'm just noting it.
I respect and understand the reaction, like, especially with we've been seeing recently Dean's kind of connection to people, especially younger people that he has kind of taken, not like ward over, but has like done his best to protect.
We also need to highlight that Garth is not answering his phone, and we don't know why.
Legitimately, like, I forgot about this, and I, like, was very worried in the moment, but then so much other stuff happened, I, like, couldn't think about it again.
When he's reporting to Naomi, the angel says that what makes Castiel uncatchable, basically, is that he chooses which Biggersons to go next. And I just really love that, like, what makes Cass uncatchable is his free will.
In the, like, roller coaster that is this whole Biggersons encounter of, like, 1, this is funny, 2, it's really wholesome, and then, like, obviously it goes off the rails. I do love that, you're right, that it's his free will. It's that he's not like other angels that lets him be Cass.
We find out that one of the classes that Sam took at Stanford was a humanities class giving an overview of Native American art. And if you haven't listened to our episode with Nell from Totally Normal about that, in that episode, we basically speculate on the classes that Sam would have taken in college. So I think that you should all go and listen to it because it was a hoot to record.
I remember talking about like the potential of Sam taking art classes specifically too, so.
Specifically art history, actually.
You knowing things.
It's almost like we knew stuff ahead of time. We find out that Naomi has erased Cass's memory and, like, reprogrammed him. And I quote, too damn many times.
I don't think the implications were fully felt when we first learned about like the messing with brains of like, oh, like she's like done some weird stuff to you and like you don't remember what she did. Oh no, she's been doing this repeatedly. I don't like this. This is messed up.
We get the iconic line about Cass, you came off the line with a crack in your chassis, and the fact that he has never done what he's been told.
I also just think it's important to point out that like car metaphor, really,
I know.
really,
It's a lot. Well, speaking of that, we get another good friend line, and this time from Cass about Dean. The last time was Benny saying that he was a good buddy to Dean. So I'm just gonna let you make of that what you will.
Coded language, coded with like big asterisks, is there really?
And they were roommates. Crowley says that if he hadn't been doing everything on set, he would have played Dean, which is just quite delicious, I have to say.
God, that is like one of those, like I know they do this at cons sometimes. I've seen other shows and actors do it, but like table reads where people play each other's characters. Oh, that has to be a conversation one day of like who would play who in like the most funny way.
Sam remembers a time where Sam and Dean went to the Grand Canyon with John, but in season 2 Croatoan, Dean says that he's never been to the Grand Canyon and that they should go together. It is technically a little discrepancy here. However, Dean does say in this episode that he barely remembers going to the Grand Canyon, so like it could be explained that way.
Glad you brought it up. I did not remember that or know or catch this discrepancy. But like, yeah, I'm okay believing just it's a discrepancy and Dean's an unreliable narrator. His life's been a little up and down. The Grand Canyon, I've heard, is underwhelming by some people, so it happens.
Crowley creates angel bullets, which are bullets made from a melted angel blade.
Friggin' anti-angel ammunition. Like, every time the show, like, one-ups itself in little ways like this, like, I know I won't be surprised if it's the last we see of it, but, like, I love that this was a thing that was done. Like, brilliant.
So now we have angel bullets, but we also have the devil's trap bullets too. So Sam says that when he was little, he would look at pictures of Sir Galahad and think that he could never go on a quest like the one for the Holy Grail because he's not clean, which really ties into the first 5 seasons of the show. And that's something that we're actually going to be doing a lot in story time in this episode.
This whole, like, Sam, like, reconnecting with memory has been very interesting. To peek behind the curtain again of a conversation we had a few minutes ago, I kind of now, the title of the next episode, I'm starting to make some connections, I think.
Do you care to give us a prediction?
I mean, it's called Clip Shows. There was an energy from you when I talked about the episode, which makes me feel like it's going to be flashback based.
Wait, hold on. For the listeners, for context, you said, I feel like we need a really good, funny episode. And I said, oh boy, are you going to be disappointed?
I'm picturing flashbacks from Sam, given this new memory lane issue he's got going on now with his proximity to Metatron, that he is going to now have like a series of flashbacks that tie into relevant story beats in this season.
Interesting. We shall see. Let's see if you read my tone of voice properly or if you projected a lot of stuff into it. We'll never know. Actually, we will know next week. Sam comes to the conclusion that the trials are purifying him from the evil that's inside him from the demon blood. My little bean. I love him.
It sounds plausible, but it also sounds like reaching.
I mean, I think it does tie back into like the way that Sam lives his life just in general, like the way that he approaches food. I am probably going to be sharing some more thoughts about that next week, actually. We meet Metatron, and Sam is incredibly offended that he hasn't heard of him or Dean, which I absolutely loved. He's like, you haven't heard of us? We're the freaking Winchesters!
Oh my gosh, that interaction killed me. That was so good.
There's another line that I want to highlight. And it is, when you create stories, you become gods of tiny, intricate dimensions unto themselves. So many worlds. There's a moment near the end of the episode where Sam and Dean are standing in front of a pile of books, and the title that actually sticks out from that pile is Stupid White Men. And I genuinely thought that this was hilarious.
How did I miss that? That's so good.
I was like, they are stupid white men, and I love them for it. We also find out that the third trial is to cure a demon.
What an interesting concept. I don't really think I've ever really considered it. Like I know we've discussed how demons come to be from like human souls tortured in hell, and it never really occurred to me like, can they be untortured?
I mean, that is a really good question. Having watched the next episode today, I'm like, well, of course they explain it. And then I'm like, no, not in this episode, in the next one. So there you go. I'm going to shut up about this for a second.
But how could Sam learn to undo torture on a demon in a flashback? Was I wrong?
I don't know. I guess we'll have to see. This week, our theme is performance. The word performance comes from the verb perform, from the Old French parfournir, where we have par, meaning completely, and fournir, meaning to provide. So, literally, to provide completely. Now, in its actual sense, it's more like to do, to carry out, to finish, to accomplish. And this meaning actually came about in the 14th century, whereas the theatrical meaning of it, as in like acting on stage or performing a character, showed up in the 17th century. And I think that this episode actually shows an interesting mix of both meanings.
I love that it kind of works on both layers like that. Like that it because yeah, you're right. Like it is very much like we see a performance this episode from a lot of the characters, but like we also see the acting almost.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Definitely.
If I can start with Dean, we've been getting like a lot of Sam focused episodes, which is a nice change of pace, which does, however, kind of leave Dean out a bit once again this week. Well, everyone else is, playing to discuss, does their own little performances. Dean is the character who has like already been performing, as we've discussed often regarding his macho masculine disguise, like he puts on for others.
If we think about Sam as like the main actor or the main performer in this episode, and actually, like you said, like in the whole arc of the trials, like story arc, then Dean would be the supporting performer. He's quite literally making sure that like Sam eats, that he sleeps, that his fever goes down. He drives them out to the place where they end up meeting Metatron. Like Dean is the Samwise in this quest to take the trials to Mordor, like literally. And there's actually even a direct reference to this in dialogue from Goodbye Stranger, where Dean says, I might not be able to carry the burden that comes along with these trials, but I can carry you. So like Dean is performing the duties of caring and supporting his brother. And he is doing that quite beautifully, actually.
I also just love how Dean is like really finding himself like back in his parenting role in regards to Sam. Like I love hate. Like I hate that he has to, but I love that he's able to. But like Sam, who's clearly having more and more trouble and weird side effects to both his trial inducing hardships and now his proximity to Metatron, apparently. Like we see it started last week, but even more with Sam's fever and weird super memory kicking in, Dean is like more and more like forced back into this caretaking role that he had for young Sam and performing as he did back then when there was no other parent to take care of him.
So this is actually making me think back to the first 5 seasons, especially the arc with like your beloved Zachariah telling Sam and Dean that they have to like quote unquote play their roles or play their part. Sam had to play Lucifer, Dean had to play Michael, and like ultimately that led to Sam dying. And it feels like this is a different flavor of this same story. Like Sam has to play the role of the person going through the trials, and Dean has to support him through that. And I guess it raises some interesting questions about what's going to happen to Sam by the time he finishes the third trial, but also it sort of feels like the brothers are repeating a cycle here to a certain degree of like doing things that they're told they have to do by God again, actually. And like this is giving me like immense brain worms.
It's kind of that weird, like, one, they were being like told you have to play this part versus here where it's like, I'm just going to leave these scripts on the table, and if you happen to read them and want to play along, that would be great.
Yeah, there you go.
So after all this Dean taking care of Sam, we'll talk about Sam, who's like really fallen down the rabbit hole this week, like sudden memory sharpening and fainting. Like he's really unraveling in a bad way. And as for our theme, he is partially, I feel, due to the effects of the trials on his mind and body, embracing his role in all of this more. Like he's seeing the end goal and is very like zoned, like zoomed out view of how it will fix things. Like he's embodying the role the trial seems to want him to play.
Right. Like Sam is all in on completing the trials, and that becomes like it becomes clear that it comes back to like the very literal definition of performance, right? And again, like it's to me pretty reminiscent of seasons 1 through 5, where Sam was so all in on like killing Lilith that he drank demon blood and accidentally freed Lucifer from the cage, you know? So here, he is so all in on completing the trials and closing the gates of hell that he's not really thinking about the potential consequences for that. If there's one thing that Sam should know at this point about the universe that he has to navigate, is that things are never as simple as they seem, right? Like things always have a cost one way or another. And Metatron does say that a little bit later in the episode. So, what is going to be the cost of completing these trials, right? Like, and Dean is showing a lot more doubt and uncertainty about that, like just like in the earlier seasons, but Sam is really all in on them.
You just said something here, and I just need to reflect on for a moment, which is the things always have a cost. And I think I've been kind of caught up on the assumption that the cost is going to be Sam has to give up his life to do this. But that almost feels like too on the nose, and I'm now worried the cost will be even greater than that somehow in some way. So while Sam's been performing so well in this new role of his, this lucid state doesn't last because apparently meeting Metatron seems to cause Sam to like snap back to himself, but also kind of go like hard the other way, telling Metatron to just straight up shoot him because his anger towards Metatron, like what a wild swing in the other direction for Sam this episode. And I think the idea of playing the role and going along peacefully was instantly shut down when he learned how Metatron has spent his like time on Earth doing nothing and hiding, despite clearly having power to make changes.
I feel like this is a pretty classic Winchester reaction. Like, you know, this whole like, we've sacrificed, hold on, let me just take my voice down. We've sacrificed our lives, our family, and our happiness to this cause, and you can't even be ours to lift a finger. You know, like it's very, it just feels very Winchester. And we've seen this a lot, really, particularly with angels, actually. And like, it makes sense, right? Because as far as angels are portrayed in Christian religion, they're supposed to be these creatures of goodness and love and light. And in this world, in this reality that 17 are living in, they're learning that angels aren't that they're not playing their part or performing their part, if you will, right? And I think that that's this anger that we're seeing in Sam in that moment. And again, it's very reminiscent of earlier seasons.
As much as I think like the level of the reaction, like the putting the gun to his head and being like pull the damn trigger, is jarring, like toned down a little normally, like it does make sense. Like that you have these omnipotent beings who have such power and like are you were raised to believe, even if up until recently they were believed to be fictional, like these benevolent forces of good, and here they are hiding or becoming the problem. Like I get it. Like, it sucks.
I mean, I think it's also meant to feel jarring. Like, I think it's written that way because Dean does kind of look at him like, what are you doing? And I do think that Sam just knew or like hoped, I guess, that Metatron would not pull the trigger because he read him correctly, right? Like, he knew that he was a coward.
The catching the cowardice thing was important there, and I think it does a lot for that moment for them and for us as viewers.
Yeah, there you go. Because we do see Metatron's reaction. He's like, oh my God, I can't shoot him. I can't do that.
Oh, I'm looking forward to more Metatron in the future. I really like the actor they chose, and I like the characterization so far. Speaking of characterization, oh my God, Kevin. Kevin deserves a medal this week. like not just his performance and like messing with fake Sam and Dean, but his resolve in the face of Crowley, like that was badass. And he does all that and stole the half of the tablet. Like, albeit Metatron could just like tell us what the third trial is, which still is like a really annoying like little plot piece. But like Kevin kicked all the ass this week.
Yeah, Kevin is really like in his Truman Show era, and I do love that for him. Like this episode is really a massive confidence boost for him. I feel like this is where we're seeing him take a real leap of faith, and that leads to so much growth so quickly, right? Like we're kind of leaving behind like this scared little boy and kind of moving into like a person who stands their ground, especially against Crowley, which, let's be realistic, like he's the king of hell. Well, I know that sounds unhinged, but
That's the line today that was unhinged. Nothing else we said today was weird.
I know. I've spent a lot of time touching grass in the last 2 weeks, and this whole conversation is unhinged to me.
Honestly, you had a line earlier that I had a reaction to, and I was like, my God, that's a thing you just said.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, I cannot believe that we are podcasting about this. Anyway, yeah, like Kevin is really kind of moving from being scared, constantly scared by everything, to actually standing his ground. And I love that for him. Good for him.
Because, like, we know, like, we see it both before, like, we see it after, especially when he gets away. Like, we see Kevin is scared, he's sad, he's miserable. But in the face of his biggest enemy, his most dangerous foe, like, we see him buck up and put on the tough guy act. And, like, unlike Dean's masculine show, I don't feel this was one to make Kevin feel better or safe, but really just to piss off Crowley and show him that he's not all that hot shit he thinks he is. And that just makes it a million times better.
I also don't think that this was an act from Kevin, right? Like, I don't think this was a tough guy act. I think this was Kevin coming into his own. It was genuine and it was real. And so it mattered.
Well said.
There's one thing that I do want to point out here, and it's that Kevin figured out that Sam and Dean weren't really Sam and Dean because they were too nice to him, which is very reminiscent of Dean figuring out that John was possessed because he was too nice to him. Sorry, not sorry.
Oh my God, I forgot about that. That is, oh, what beautiful symmetry.
I have thoughts about that people don't like to hear, but there you go.
Well, you know I like your hot take, so I'm looking forward to it.
We'll get to that later.
We do have to go back to Cass, who is his old self, mostly. Even if he's not seeing Dean currently, Cass is no longer a puppet to Naomi, which I love, and can be himself and, use Biggerson as cover from the Angel, which might just be the most delicious thing I could imagine, besides a tasty burger from Biggerson's. Sorry, they pay me to say that one.
Cass has a specific task to perform this week, which no one else can really do for him, and that's to protect the Angel tablet. And Cass, just like Sam, is all in. And I really love that he picked Biggerson's actually to hide, because they're all the same across the United States in this universe. He could have gone anywhere in the world. He could have gone to forests. He could have gone to the deserts. He could have gone into caves. He could have gone into the ocean, for crying out loud. But he picked the American version of Tim Hortons to hide, which is equal parts ridiculous and brilliant. So he's basically creating a stage for himself because he knows that he's being watched. Very Truman Show again. And that stage is just completely indistinguishable.
I never really considered the other side of the performance side of this topic or theme is that there's also the audience to all these characters in these moments. Really it layers.
Well, because when you perform, it's not usually for yourself.
It didn't click till now, but we do see Cass performing his best under such pressure this week, like Kevin, standing up to his oppressor and fighting for what he feels is right and what he believes in. And I do want to point out that we see Cass seemingly kill an angel again when he swore off fighting and violence a while ago after killing an angel. Only going back to it because of Naomi's conditioning, it seems so extreme now for him to kill Ion in this way that he did. Even doing it at all, but doing it in such a horribly gory manner. Really, ugh.
I mean, he had to get out of there, right? Somehow, and he wasn't going to let him go. I also just want to come back on what we were talking about earlier with like the angels and supernatural not being good or not playing the part of the good. Cass says something like that to Naomi, actually, when she does catch him. He goes, "We're supposed to be their shepherds." And this is when we find out that Cass doesn't actually remember the part that he played in terrorizing humans.
Yeah, this whole kind of layer of like these other performances that he wasn't an audience for. He has no memory of. God, it's just clicking to me now. That was a really big plot point recently in Doctor Who, but like clearly well after this. And I'm wondering how like the Super Who-lock fandom at that time with Jodie Whittaker's run like connected the dots to this, and I just never heard about it.
The dots were for sure connected. The dots are always connected.
Oh, for sure. We have to talk about Megatron and how he did a good job not showing the odd. I'm bad at Transformers jokes. I have this by one. I'm done. That's out. Sam and Dean got theirs. I got mine. We're good. He didn't kill the Autobots. Good job. The man was like terrified, and I'm not sure if it's cowardice or like well thought out yet. But either way, he like elected to leave behind his everything and become the human disguise figure we meet this week. Like mostly everyone this week is playing a part, performing, if you will, and he's being like a silent observer, watching the world and all of its chaos, all of its performances around him via stories and books, while not taking part in any of it. Is this him protecting himself and by extension others from his archangel brothers, stealing his knowledge, or is this truly cowardice? I really don't know which one it is yet. Is he just running away from his problems rather than trying to face them, or is he doing the right thing by hiding?
So, those are all really great questions that I am not going to be able to comment on at the moment. And I'm actually not going to comment on Metatron too much in this particular episode for reasons. But I think that all of your questions and observations are really good and you should definitely hang on to them. The one thing I'll say about Metatron is that he looks like what I imagine Stephen King looks like.
It's funny. I had to do a little like deep dive on the actor playing him because like for some reason in my mind when I saw the actor they chose, all I wish they had done was get the villain from Princess Bride, with the poisons.
Oh, I don't remember.
I can picture him. I can't think of his name right now. But like it just feels like they wanted him and went for like the Wish.com version of him, who's still an amazing actor who has an amazing history and I adore. I could feel the energy they wanted to go for, and I think they did a really good job there with him. I'm really looking forward to more Metatron.
See, it's funny because like I see him and I see like Tim Curry energy actually.
Oh my god, Tim Curry should be in everything. That's another story.
This episode gave me all kinds of brainworms. Like, actually, listeners, like, just think about the next time that we see someone in front of like a bunch of TV monitors. Just think about the next time that this show is going to talk about stories and narratives in a very explicit way. Think about the next time that we're going to talk about escaping the narrative in a Truman Show style. Also think about Sam and Dean having to quote unquote play their parts in later season. I feel like I'm just now realizing just how foundational this episode really is for the last few seasons of the show. Like Bugs like foundational, which I cannot believe is something that comes out of my mouth, but here we are. And I'm obviously very limited with what I can say in this particular context, like with Drew listening and all. And it is killing me. So for this particular segment of Critical Time, I am sending out a call to any listener who wants to scream about this with me to continue the conversation either on Twitter or in our Carrying Wayward server.
You know I'm good. I don't go looking for things that can spoil me. I do my best to avoid anything I can, but like I am so like I know it's still like I know we're halfway there, but it still feels like such a long way to go when we can sit down and like we're gonna miss things for sure, but like all the things, especially having watched it in like as compressed a time as we're watching it in, although I know the way you binge shows this is like eons for you. Sorry, I throw you under the bus because I can.
What did I watch? Actually, lately, I watched the new season of Criminal Minds Evolution when I got back. So I watched a whole season of something, in the last 2 days.
Oh, never change, please.
This week we have a message from Shaylee, and before we listen to it, we want to remind you to send us a 3-minute voicemail. To respond to anything we discussed today or to ask us a question, you can use the recording app on your phone and email us the recording at carryingwayward@gmail.com.
Hello, Carrying Wayward. I have just listened to your episode about the LARPing, and I have an interesting fun fact that you may or may not have gone over. So the escapism with Charlie Bradbury is loosely based off another show that Felicia Day was on. Felicia Day, obviously the actress of Charlie Bradbury, had her own mini series called The Guild, which was based off D&D. And the main part of her character there was that she was escaping reality through D&D, which is a form of role-playing. And I just think it's very interesting, the connection between her LARPing as Charlie Bradbury and her LARPing with her D&D. Anyway, it was nice to talk to you, and I hope to continue listening to your podcast. I really enjoy it, and I will talk to you again soon.
Thank you for the voicemail, Shaylee. I haven't thought about the Guild in so long that, it feels pre-YouTube when it clearly wasn't. It's not that old. Weirdly enough, recently rewatched the music videos from that show. The Do You Want to Date My Avatar? I still love that song. I think it has to go with part of why I always really loved the role she played and the character she played, and why I was very much excited for her in Supernatural, because the Guild was actually my first time having her star in a role. I watched the Guild before I watched Buffy, where she again played a very minor role, but was again sort of just a villain fighting superwoman, again just playing these great roles that I love her in. So getting her in Supernatural, a big part of me was the knowing her as this iconic nerdy female lead. So getting her LARPing, I think, was so perfect for her as a character and as an actor. And again, tying it I'm willing to bet there were some Easter eggs for the Guild that we probably didn't catch in her outfits or some stuff around the office. I'd love to go back and rewatch that now for some context. And maybe I'll go re-binge the Guild. It's been a while. I don't think I've ever actually finished the last season or two because I fell off.
Shaylee, thank you so much. I haven't actually seen The Guild, but I suppose that I could just binge it this weekend if I wanted to. How many seasons is it, Drew?
I want to say 4 or 5, but they're also 10 episodes, and each episode's 10 minutes.
Oh my god, I can do that in a day!
You can do it in one laundry load.
Basically. I mean, I guess it's a little hard for me to specifically answer the comment. So, yeah, I mean, in that way, no, I did not know about that specific character. So I actually, the first time that I saw Felicia Day, I didn't really realize that it was Felicia Day because it was on Buffy, right? So that was when she was really, really young, and she plays one of the young slayers, right? And I didn't really recognize her. And it's going back to rewatch Buffy recently where I was like, oh my God, that's Felicia Day. So I feel her being in the Guild, even though it's interesting because I really know Felicia Day from this particular franchise, and yet I always imagine her as the nerdy girl. And so I think this might have to do with the roles that she has either picked for herself or that she's been offered. Maybe she's been a bit typecast into that kind of role. But I just think it suits her really nicely. I think that all the parts that she has taken on, all the performances that she has offered us have always been like top tier when it comes to these types of characters. And I just, you know, you just know that there are people who are writing scripts and who are like putting in notes in the casting being like Felicia Day type actress, right? So I don't know. I think that that's pretty cool. And I think that she does a great Charlie, and I'm sure she's wonderful in the Guild, and I will probably be binging that soon. So thank you so much for letting us know about that.
I'm also going to use this as a chance, if you haven't, Shaylee, or if anyone hasn't watched the 3-part mini musical that she stars in, along with Neil Patrick Harris and Nathan Fillion, everyone should go watch Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog. It is magic. They will one day do a second season, and she's supposed to come back for that, and I'm so excited.
That was like a moment in time.
That was a time. Yup.
So Drew, what reflection and call to action does this episode bring up for you?
Between this episode and listening to some of the cast interviews that the Gate Leapers have been doing with their other regulars, and even our Impolitalks, I'm reminded how much I love stories. I love hearing people's stories, you know, whether they're heart-wrenching or eye-opening or just silly anecdotes. Like, I want to remind myself to keep asking people for more of their stories. Like, I just want to absorb people's stories. And Mary, for you this week, your reflection and call to action?
Just to kind of like date and time this episode, the recording of this episode a little bit. Like, we're in the context of an American presidential election. And so watching this episode in this particular context is making me think about Timothy Snyder's lesson number 1 from his book on tyranny. And it goes like this: do not obey in advance. Most of the power of authoritarianism is freely given. In times like these, individuals think ahead about what a more repressive government will want and then offer themselves without being asked. A citizen who adapts in this way is teaching power what it can do. Tim Snyder's pretty awesome. This was Carrying Wayward, a supernatural podcast produced by Rochelle Castellano, hosted by Drew Schulman and Marie Vigourou. Thank you to everyone supporting us on Ko-fi or Patreon, especially our bunker supporters, Elle, Jeremiah Thomas, and Simone. We'd also like to thank Jake Lionheart for our music and Jacqueline Tucci for additional sound editing. Head over to carryingwayward.com to become a patron or a Ko-fi subscriber, and for our merch store and our socials. And write us a review on Apple Podcasts. Carry on, our wayward friends.